Suraj, it's great to get to be with you on stage today. Global Head of Advanced Analytics Office at Western Digital. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about what it is that you do at Western Digital, and perhaps a little bit about Western Digital itself?
Sure, Kurt. So first of all, thank you for inviting me over here. And definitely would like to share our experience over the last, I would say, 6 years or so journey, right? So Western Digital, just as to set the context, Western Digital is a data infrastructure company, and we have about 40% of the world's storage market, and the brands are SanDisk brand, the Hitachi brand, and the Western Digital storage brands, right? And we have about, I would say, 15 factories around 8 countries globally, without including the R&D facilities. So it's a fairly diverse enterprise. My role is I lead the Advanced Analytics Office over there, and it's a sort of an enterprise role where the focus is try to figure out how to quickly accelerate and scale analytics across the organization to capture business value. An important word over here is scale, because unless we scale, we can't get value out of it, right? And the types of solutions sort of takes a sort of a diverse hue. It can be factory focus within the 4 walls. How do you improve operations? How do you take out costs, et cetera? But beyond that, you actually do a lot of work with the engineering development team. We also do work with, outside the factory 4 walls, we do work with procurement system, especially important during COVID time. We do manage finished goods logistics, optimizing that aspect of it. And then in the end of the value chain is, of course, the customer experience. We have solutions around that.
So, Suraj, the title of this talk is all about the journey, right? The journey that you've been on. So perhaps could you start us at the beginning of that journey? Where were you initially before you really started this investment? What was that before state? And thinking perhaps across the traditional dimensions of people, process, and technology.
Yeah, sure. So maybe the best way to think about it is our journey probably started around 2015. And that was my first introduction to Western Digital as a consultant at that time. And what we saw was that all the analytics that were happening in silos within functions. So when I say within functions, think about individuals, 15 factories across the globe. They were managing their own analytics on their own. And as a result of which, the big challenge is solutions are developed, but you can't leverage it across factories because they were developed for a specific environment. And as a result of which, you can't scale them up. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect was that each of these individual organizations will have some people who are focused on analytics and the stack on it, but it never reaches a critical mass, as a result of which you cannot scale up, right? And if you can't have that critical mass, it's very hard to develop careers in that area, so people will stay for some time and drift away. And that basically is a people challenge that is also a process, a technology challenge over there, because you cannot scale up. Now, in terms of, I would say around 2016 or so, we made some important bets on saying that we need to move to cloud. Now, at that stage, there were probably 1 or 2 dominant players over there. And we said, OK, let's use cloud strategy. And that started setting up the stage for a platform where people can start building common solutions. And that actually sort of kicked off us on the later part of the journey.
Good. Well, looking forward then, where do you see this journey taking you? Is there an end destination, or where are you looking to get to?
So I think I would say the underlying theme, which at least my office thinks about, is connected enterprise. So the idea is that we need to be able to think of solutions which is able to connect enterprise from end to end. And when I say end to end, it's going all the way from supplier, starting from the supplier, going into R&D, then going into factories, going to quality and the logistics, and all the way to the customer, and then feedback from the customer. So that's our goal. Now, in terms of setting our journey, it's a long journey. And But the important portion in this is that we cannot think in terms of back-ending the value. We have to make sure that as we build the solution, we are getting incremental value. But at the same time, we are maintaining this vision that all these pieces that we are building up as platform solutions and applications do end towards that connected enterprise. But we have to make sure to gain momentum, we are getting incremental value, as a result of which we can make incremental investments to get that value.
I see. And so, of course, you're making lots of decisions as you're on this journey. One of those decisions is which technologies you choose to partner with as one component of that journey. You mentioned also the choices around moving to cloud, and then of course choices once you've made that decision. How do you approach that decision? What are your criteria for selecting a partner?
Okay, so my short answer would be avoid lock-ins. So what I mean by that is the whole space of analytics and data management that is exploding and expanding in unpredictable ways. So we always have to make sure that when we are opting for solutions, we have ability to pivot in different directions. Now, why is that important? I'll give you a flavor of that. So back, I said, in 2018 or 2016 or so, we made the decision that we'll go on cloud, right? And the whole push was cloud, 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 cloud. But by 2018, it became clear that many of our factory solutions required very low latency solution, which the cloud cannot provide that, right? And as a result of which, we started investing on on-prem solutions also. So now we have a hybrid environment. And now we are seeing another swing to the pendulum saying that, oh, you know what? Bandwidth is not an issue. Maybe we can, if it is not extreme low latency, we can still manage through cloud. So again, the pendulum is shifting. And now we are saying, OK, it's going to be more a business decision, whether it's a CapEx or a OpEx investment to decide whether it's an on-prem or a cloud solution, right? And as a result of which, the important lesson for us is that we need to maintain flexibility and nimbleness as we go. And right now, the nimbleness is we are trying to get to frameworks or operating systems where you can have a common plane across the hybrid, across the hybrid and even multi-cloud partner solutions, so that we can maintain flexibility as we go forward. And one of the reasons we are partnering with Dataiku over here is the ability to take on workloads from ML in a very flexible manner, because we have many, many stakeholders, many, many solution types, and we need a sort of integrating platform around the ML workloads that we do right now.
Well, and maybe if I can dig in a little bit on that strategy around hybrid, but also multi-cloud. That's something that I've heard a lot from, from our customers, from the market in general these days. Can you maybe walk us through how Western Digital made that decision, weighing the benefits, but also, of course, the added complexity of having such an approach?
Yeah. So actually, we are fairly well into that journey right now. So I think the decision was made sometime, I would say, a year and a half ago, saying that, OK, we do need the hybrid solution. That's obvious because of business operations require that. Factories require low latency solutions, so it is a must. So that was one pivotal decision. Then the other aspect was in terms of dependency on a single provider for cloud. The question was, it puts us in a bind both in terms of technology and also in terms of having a cost leverage with their provider, right? And those two decisions become very, very important for us to say, should we be doing a multi-cloud strategy or not? Now, the good thing is, I would say, this year, probably late last year, there were solution providers which will allow us to go into a common management plane, which can go operate on a hybrid environment and also multi-cloud environment. And that sort of triggered us saying that we started doing POCs on it. And now we already have a hybrid environment enabled. And now we are enabling the multi-cloud almost there.
It sounds like you're getting close to getting to the best of all worlds, if that's possible.
Yeah, the technology may swing in a different direction, so
course,
we'll see.
right.
Yeah.
Good. So again, thinking about that journey, we discussed a little bit your beginning state, your before state. Can you tell us a little bit about what has changed? Now, we have discussed the technology changes, but I'm wondering especially about the people and process changes that have gotten you, from that starting point early on to where you are today.
Yeah, so I think one of the very important steps we took was about 3.5 years ago, we formed this office I was talking about, is the Advanced Analytics Office. So it was the goal is to create this central organization which supports scaling needs. And right now, we started off with about 30 people. Now we are about a 150 people organization. And scattered across the globe, a lot of people in US and also a lot of people in offshore sites and also low-cost centers also. And what that has done for us is we take on a very, very platform-oriented approach. What does that mean? The idea is that when we build solutions, we think in terms of platforms specific to certain solution themes. So for example, if you're doing dispatching work, think in terms of, when I say dispatching, it's in a factory context where you're dispatching WIP from one step to the other step, right? So when you're thinking in terms of solution, you're thinking, let me build a solution which has the potential to scale up. The platform is the underlying piece which will enable the solution. But then when we go from factory A to factory B, we'll do customization as needed on the application. And the 80-20 rule is like 80% is reuse and 20% is customization, because each factory will have its own specific dashboard needs based on the business operations and margin calls, et cetera, right? So that has boded very well. And during that journey, we also realized that if you want to build a solution, you have to think in terms of full stack solution, right? So the idea is you need to think about data engineering, you need to think about data science, you need to think about full stack development to support it, the big data platform to support it, and DevOps to support it, et cetera. So that basically leads us to the leverage, both in terms of on the people side of things. On the process side of things, we are extremely, extremely focused on business value. Don't start anything till we get alignment from the business on the business value. Measure twice before we jump in. But once we jump in, we have this whole process of learning cycles, rapid learning cycles to rapid scale cycles. The goal being that you want to put time limits on every activity that you do so that you don't have any long tail solutions which just becomes endless analysis. So we have a business process for managing that across all the work that we do.
That's very interesting. I think I may want to talk to you more about that afterwards. So of course you've been making all these changes. You've been on this journey, and we've heard about some of the cases where you've been able to templatize some of the work to be able to reuse it between factories. I'm sure the audience would love to hear some more details about some of those specific use cases. Would you be able to walk us through one or two use cases that that you feel illustrate what you've been working on?
Sure. So maybe I should just mention, so September of this year, Western Digital, two of the factories in Western Digital, one was in Thailand, the other in Malaysia, we received the Global Lighthouse Award, which is given out by World Economic Forum. And it's given to companies or factories which are considered as leaders in the 4IR technologies, adoption and scaling. So and you can read about it. It just came out recently. But I wanted to mention two use cases from there, which are included in that World Economic Forum discussions. So the first one is around digital twin. It's a slightly different use case than typical data science. This is more driven by simulation. And the idea of a digital twin is that you mimic aspects of the factory. An ideal digital twin captures everything about the factory, but that's too long to make. Right? And the idea is that there are certain areas which are very, very complex for us to build models. So the approach you take is you collect information from the process which you're trying to mimic, and then you create a twin or simulation out of it. Once you've enabled a simulation and you're able to validate that its operation matches the factory operations, then now you have a tool for doing all kinds of what-if analysis. You can tweak knobs around it and see what the performance is of the digital twin is without having to change anything in the factory operations a priori. So what is the application area? So we have done applications in many, many different areas. To give an example of that is factory layout planning. If you're building a new factory, how do you plan material movement across the shop floor, right? And think of this as we are making about roughly about 250,000 drives. It's coming out every month. How do you manage that, right? The production is going to go. When you're thinking about production, you're trying to see, okay, how do I place all these manufacturing cells around the flow? How do you optimize it? So the idea is you can do everything in this digital twin first before committing your resources to the actual factory layout. We also do a lot of work around smart dispatching. How do you move your autonomous robo vehicle across the factory so that you don't have traffic jams in the factory? You also have things about auto scheduling. When you have a huge product mix that you're pumping into the factory, how do you decide which product should go next to the other one so that you minimize the setup time between products, right? And then, so these are some of the applications around the digital twin. There are many, many more applications that you can leverage once you have validated that this digital twin represents the factory, right? So you can do a lot of what-if analysis. A different application, which is very relevant for COVID time, was on finished goods logistics. So one of the challenges we have, and this now is based on, again, a slightly different focus from data science. This is more focused on operation research. So in the operation research area, the challenge for us was that we ship material across the globe from Thailand factories and, let's say, Shanghai factories, right? And there are various, how do you bring down the cost for that shipment, right? So the strategy, a lot of the strategy involves is how do I consolidate shipment so that it lowers the cost, but the beauty of consolidation is that while you're consolidating, you're improving your on-time performance if you plan it correctly. At the same time, you decrease the cost because of consolidation. Similarly, but now in the COVID time, what happened was freight carriers were suddenly jacking up their pricing to us. So the challenge for us is how do you manage pricing in this environment? So the trick over here is that we started doing, giving high impactful lanes. We'll identify those lanes which have a little more margin for on-time performance, but have high volume. We put that for spot bidding. And as a result of which we get lower costs on it. Similarly, we can do tricks like a regular airline reservation system, where if you tell upfront the airline how much space you want, you get a lower cost, right? So what is that balance you want to do for your freight so that you get the right pricing, but you also understand that there are some areas which require very rapid delivery? We manage that. So those are some of the applications where a lot of the analytics, advanced analytics has helped us. Now, there's a whole bunch of stuff around AI, ML that we do on image analysis and quality improvement, et cetera. But these were slightly different examples, so I just wanted to share that.
No, that's extremely helpful to hear, and especially in this context, of a logistics-heavy manufacturing environment. I think that's very interesting. Just a note of housekeeping: we will be taking questions in just a few minutes. So if you have some questions, just feel free to start thinking about those. I still have a couple more questions though for you, Suraj. I'm interested to understand what challenges you anticipate that companies might be facing when they're attempting to embark upon this journey that you've now been on for 6 years. Challenges in terms of adoption or trust internally, inertia about the old way of doing things. What might be some of those challenges?
Yeah, so I think it's important to recognize that innovation is going to happen across the organization in various pockets, and that we should make sure we are not damping that in any way, right? The innovation will happen. The challenge that usually comes up is, though the innovation happens, the value of that innovation is understood, but it's very hard to scale it up. And if we don't have the right set of people, process, and technology we are referring to, it's very hard to take an idea from POC to a scaled solution. And this is probably true of especially asset-heavy organizations like ours, where you have factories and they have very regimented environments. And the challenge is, once you build that solution, can you actually bolt onto an existing, very stringent environment, right? Anything that has very tight business processes, which you can't shake, you can't manage, those are the challenging environments. You really need to think in terms of what is the process of taking your POC to actual scale realization.
Understood. Well, and then just one last question for you then, Suraj, before we open it up to the audience. Just very simply, but perhaps very broad, what's next? What's next for you? What's next for Western Digital?
Yeah, so I think I can easily say that the next 3-4 years, we are going to full speed drive towards achieving the connected enterprise goal. And we have started doing a lot of solutions which are like, I would say, building blocks across various portions of the organization that I mentioned. But the intent would be that as you build these blocks, you are always thinking about how are they going to connect. And an analogy would be that think of it as small pieces of cords which can eventually tie up into a longer rope. And that leads to the end-to-end view of the world. And when I say a cord could be, let me connect central planning and procurement and finished goods logistics. That's a cord, right? Another cord could be, hey, let me connect factory and finished goods, right? So in the end, you join all these cords, and then you head towards end-to-end. And there is no reason to think that when I sense a demand, why can't I trigger off central planning? Why can't I trigger off factory systems? Why can't I trigger off procurement to do all the things that are necessary, which are done right now with extreme manual work, right? So.
Well, certainly in your space, I'm sure that there's a great appreciation for automation. You were talking about the automated robots driving around the factory floor, and so this is another next step in that direction.
Definitely.
Very good. I could keep asking you questions, but I do want to give the audience members an opportunity to ask questions.